All right, we are going to talk about a couple different things this week also, and then you also have your first quiz. Um, just I want to talk about that at the beginning so that I make sure that you know what's going on. In your module, I posted a list of the materials that you should have to make sure that you can be successful on the quiz. So you have some specific notes that I had you guys print the PowerPoint and things like that. And then any of the videos that we watch, you want to take really detailed notes on and have those in front of you because a lot of the terminology, a lot of the list, some of these things or describe these things all come from those videos because we don't have a book. So make sure you have all of that in front of you kind of in an organized fashion and it'll make your test a lot easier. The quiz is timed. You have 2 hours. That's why you want to make sure you have all that information there because you won't have time to go out and get it once you start the test. Once you start the test, you can't go back. You can't redo it. You can't stop partway. You have that 2 hour time block. You got to sit and knock it out. Also, once you move on from a question, you can't go back to a question. A lot of them are going to be fill in where you're going to be listing or describing. Make sure if it says describe, you actually describe it. Don't just list. And really, it's not meant to be difficult. It's just meant to make sure that you really are watching the videos and that you're taking some notes and that you really are going through the PowerPoints when I give them to you or whatever it is. So if you have all of the information in front of you and you've actually read it and looked through it, it shouldn't be bad. In my day class, I had more than one kid get 100% on it. So you should be able to do that. Just keep in mind there's not that many of you guys in this online section, but do keep in mind that I check the time that you're logged in. I check your answers to see if they are coordinating with someone else's. And if you cheat, obviously you get a 0. And so you don't want to do that because it's meant to be, it's not meant to be difficult, but if you cheat, you'll get a 0. So just keep that in mind. If you choose to try to look in the internet for something, I'm going to caution you because even if it is somewhat of a correct answer, if it's not what I've given you, you're not going to get full credit for it. And if you decide to try to copy and paste, you'll definitely get a 0 for that as well. So keep those things in mind. The topics for this week that you guys are talking about, you have some of the learning type stuff. So you're going to do your motor development, and your motor learning. And I think those are two of the most important concepts. Like I wish we could just teach a motor learning class or a motor development class because realistically speaking, as a coach, especially if you're going to coach younger kids, it's so important. The process of learning and how we pick up those things. I'm just going to hit on some of the big things. A couple of the big concepts would be like how you schedule your practice. And I don't mean time-wise. I mean like you could do like blocking where you do the same thing over and over and over. And the benefit of that is hopefully they can learn the correct way. The downfall of that is it's not very realistic or game-like. So typically speaking, as a coach, you're going to do a lot of blocking early on because you're going to try to make sure they know how to do skill by skill very well. And then you want to get more into kind of like a variable type schedule where you're throwing them into more real game-like situations. So in the beginning of my season, I would always do a lot of pass, this is just how you pass a volleyball and different drills with just passing. And then this is how we hit and we would break it down. The very first part of hitting is your arm swing. So we're just going to swing your arm. And then I'm going to throw in, well, now you have to jump. So you're going to jump and swing your arm. And then I'm going to say, okay, your last 2 steps look like this. So you're going to do your last 2 steps, jump, swing your arm. And so we kind of build backwards. But it's skill, skill, skill. By the end of the season, I'm hardly doing any of that at all. It's almost all game like 6-on-6, but we're going to specifically work on tipping to that corner, or, you know, whatever it is, but it's putting all those things together and having it be as realistic as possible. And all of that, the concept behind how we learn, that is motor learning and motor development. Motor development is more the physical aspect of how our body actually develops. One of the big things we talk about with motor development is when is it appropriate to start having kids lift weights. So there's a lot of controversy about how early we should do that. Another one is pitching. And specifically, you see them discuss it more with boys, but I would say even venturing into girls now as we start to do some more fast pitching with girls at a younger age. But with boys, it's been a conversation for a while with baseball and pitching, and when is it appropriate body-wise, development-wise, to put them into that situation. There's a lot of issues with growth plates not being fully developed. And so that's why with pitching, a lot of times they try to make them wait till a little bit later to do full-blown pitching. Same thing with weights. You're dealing with a lot of joints and body movements in weights that we have to be really careful that we're not injuring a child, or even if they're not injured, we can prevent development from happening with things like the growth plates and things like that. So we have to be really, really careful. But the motor learning part is more the how do we learn skills? And you guys will see in the videos, you know, you have gross motor skills, which are those big movements, walking, jumping, things like that, into your fine motor skills, which are going to be anything more detailed. And so in sports, we use a lot of gross motor skills, but you're also going to see some fine motor skills based on your sport. I can obviously speak the most towards volleyball, but you know, we start with big movements. Okay, like I said, when you're doing a hitting approach, that's a big gross motor skill, and so it takes us a long time just to get the footwork down. Like I always tell my kids, footwork is the most important thing. Footwork, footwork, footwork. All of the stuff after that comes later, because if you don't get the footwork, nothing else you do is ever going to become, you know, automated. And so we work and work and work on that until they don't even have to think about the footwork anymore. Once that comes naturally, then we go into, okay, now how are we swinging our arm? Which direction are we facing when we swing? Things like that. And then you go all the way down into, okay, what's your hand doing? Are you dropping this way so that the ball spins in a certain direction? Are you dropping this way? Are you, are you snapping your wrist? Are you pushing with the tip? Like some of those more fine motor skills. And so you see that in probably any sport where you're transitioning from a big gross motor skill and eventually probably paying close to some really close fine details. You guys are watching some different videos on that. Make sure you know just what are some of those stages in that skill acquisition. What are some important aspects? What are some good things in one of the videos it shows you what are some good things that you can kind of do in practice to address this stage of learning, you know, and you'll see in certain stages, like especially in that beginning stage where they're just learning, they need a lot of feedback, and the feedback needs to be detailed and it needs to be positive, but you don't want to overload them. So you need to keep like simple terminology. The worst thing you can do is take someone who's just learning a skill and all of a sudden, you know, let's say they hit a ball out of bounds and I'm like, okay, well, your feet were turned the wrong way and your shoulders were doing this and your hand was doing that and blah, blah, blah. It's too much to process. You really need to break it down and pick one thing at a time for beginners to kind of focus on. Otherwise, it's going to be too overwhelming. And so, you know, I might just say feet and that's it. And that would be a key word for them to know, like, you know, their footwork was off or whatever it was. You know, so a lot of times I'll just say footwork, you know, or if their arms are facing the wrong way and they're passing the ball, you know, in the wrong directions, I'll just say platform. And so it really just gives them one thing to focus on. Obviously, as you get more advanced, you can start to be more detailed in your description. You can start to provide a little bit more information. But make sure, again, you're taking really detailed notes of that motor learning, that motor development. The mind of an athlete discussion kind of plays into this week and next week on your quiz from that. But that's just kind of looking at, again, the mental aspect. And specifically, I'm having you look up more of the topics we're talking about next week, like emotion and motivation and things like that. So that should be an interesting, discussion to be a part of. But the motor development, motor learning, that's going to be key in your quiz. And then your quiz, you're going to have Friday. So that Sunday, you're kind of starting the new information, which is a motivation assignment. If you have any questions about the quiz or, the information going into the quiz, most of you guys are on campus, please make sure you contact me, and I'll help in any way I can. Okay?